So I want to do a quick overview of how to customize the theming in Visual Studio 2022. It used to be that you could just go to Fonts Options under Environment and all of the UI, you could change font sizes, fonts, the colors, the background colors of the Visual Studio UI in addition to your syntax highlighting. But they took a lot of that away, and now the only way to customize some of that stuff is by creating a theme. The other issue is that if you select someone else's theme, you can't tweak it at all through the Visual Studio settings. There are some things like syntax highlighting that it is exposed, but a lot of the stuff that is set through a theme, that those options are not exposed to the Visual Studio environment settings anymore. So what you have to do is you have to build your own theme if you want to tweak that stuff. You can take other people's themes and tweak them, but you have to do it through the theme designer. And the theme designer is an extension you install in Visual Studio that gives you a project template for creating themes. And the themes that you're creating, you're actually building a Visual Studio extension. So when you download, install this, it's also going to install the Visual Studio SDK from the Visual Studio installer because you are building an extension. Once you've got that loaded up, you're going to have in extensions here, we'll have the Visual Studio Theme Designer. I also installed the theme pack to give me some more themes to start with as examples. And you'll notice something interesting here is that when you create your theme, you can load it multiple times, install it multiple times, and you'll get this wonderful little symptom where it doesn't replace the one with the same name. It just keeps adding numbers to it. Um, so we are going to go ahead and create a new project and get to using that new project template. There's my VS theme project. I'm going to call it, let's call it Crow Theme and Solution Directory 4.8. I don't know what this actually affects. I just chose the newest version. We'll create that. And I'm going to pop open a new folder here and navigate to the bin directory. I'm going to switch this to release. The other thing that I think I may need to do first, I got an error before, and I think it's because I didn't select my base theme. So you double click on this VS theme right here. The project name is what's going to become your extension name. I'm not sure if this custom theme with the name of this file trickles up to anywhere if you start publishing this to other people. But basically you're going to start here with a quick start. And one of the reasons that I installed the theme pack is just to get more options here. And so we're all pretty familiar with the dark theme that comes built in. So I'm going to choose that as it's kind of your starting theme, and then you can go and tweak that. And you get these three primary accent and secondary colors. They kind of give you an indication of the kind of things that affects. And when you pick one of these, it kind of does a little bit of a spectrum of that. And these pickers are a little bit quirky. Sometimes, depending on where you click on the OK button, it loses your selection and you have to just do it again. So I find a lot of times I have to do these pickers twice. And it kind of shows you there's going to be a spectrum of those colors it uses. So there's going to be some areas where it's going to take your color and desaturate it a little bit or make it darker, and others it's going to be lighter. And the same is true of the accent and secondary. So just using these three things, they kind of help you out a little bit in trying to generate. Okay, I want using these three colors, and they'll generate kind of a spectrum of other shades of those colors to use in various places. Because in some of these menus you're going to have things where different colored text with different colored backgrounds and scroll bars and things that you want to be slightly different so they stand out against each other. You don't have to do this. You can leave it as the default. And this does not cover everything. So there are themes where you'll get someone's theme, and there will be customizations that don't get changed by just doing these three colors. You actually have to drill down into the elements. I don't I didn't really find much of what I needed in here. A lot of this is UI related stuff. When you start digging into some things, then with the theme, you do have the syntax highlighting. So if you wanted to start, say, method names, you can search here and you can find it either. If you don't find it here, there's two sections that most of the syntax related things are under, and that is the text editor language service items and the Roslyn text editor MEF items. And that's because I believe the Roslyn syntax analysis engine is being leveraged to identify, okay, what is a namespace and what is a class name and things like that. So I can change the color of namespaces, and I'm actually going to so let me do a couple things here. So I'm going to save this, and then I'm going to build the project. The solution will be fine too. And I switched to release. I got an error, I think, because I didn't pick the quick theme earlier, and I had to start over. And so if I go to the project folder, I can see I have the release folder here, and I have a VSIX file. So I could actually now install this into Visual Studio and get this theme. The other thing I could do is I can do start debug instance, and what will happen is it'll launch a new Visual Studio window with my extension installed, as if I were debugging an extension, and I can see what the theme looks like that way. But the easiest way to kind of test your theme out, I'm going to switch to a project I already have open. The easiest way to test your theme out is just by I loaded some you could just open some other syntax files. I actually added another project just so I had some code that I could look at and play around with. So for example, if I want to change the coloring of numbers, you kind of have to know, I thought this would be called like a literal. I searched for literal, and what I thought was that didn't do anything. And so there is a little bit of trial and error. And you'll see here, if I right click on these and do modify hue and saturation, it gives me a little bit more detail that this is under the text editor, which this window is the text editor. It's a number and it's the foreground color. So you can see there's two identical items called number, and one is the foreground and one is the background. And unfortunately, they kind of hide this away, so you have to jump in here and see that. So I can pick a different color for this. So we can make our numbers green. And then you can just apply it. And it's just going to apply it to this window that you're in. So you don't have to mess around with installing the extension or jumping in and out. Now when you finish and you're all done and you like what you've got, then you're going to build this and you're going to install that extension as a regular extension. But just while you're playing around with it, you can just apply and see those changes take effect immediately. And I can do things like I can right click this and I can shift the saturation down, lightness, darkness. If I like my saturation, and if I maybe a lot of times when you're doing this, you kind of want to maybe use for everything this identical saturation and lightness, and maybe just shift the hue, or vice versa. Some people like to use very similar colors and then just shift the saturation and lightness to get kind of a theme going, which is kind of along the lines of kind of what this is doing, is they're just kind of shifting the saturation or the lightness, darkness to kind of create this spectrum and then apply these to different elements so you kind of have a theme going. The biggest, like I mentioned, the biggest challenge is kind of finding, there are a lot of things that look a little bit redundant, and trying to figure out exactly where everything is at. Like, I just noticed this here. I didn't even realize the line numbers were here. So if I wanted to change that to some crazy number and get some, like if I want to make all my line numbers maybe red, let's try red. Actually, I don't want to do that menu. I want to do this menu. And let's do kind of a dark red and apply that. And there we go. The other thing you can do is you can actually open this. I'm going to go back to the other window because I don't want to mess up what I've got going here. you can open with on the VS theme file, do an XML editor. And so there might be cases where you're getting tired of that, digging through that little UI. I think it's helpful to kind of jump in here and see how things are organized, how they're grouped, because you can't, there's a few things that are a little bit difficult to see in the other view. And you might prefer just editing from here occasionally to copy some colors or do maybe a mass replace. Maybe you're like, well, in this theme, this is probably some sort of gray color. Maybe you just want to do a find and replace of all of this color with a specific color. That way you just find everything that is that color. The other thing you can do is in here, you can change, instead of by category, you can do by color. So the one thing I did a couple times is like, let's say I don't know what this document tab is called, what the name of it is. And so I can come in here and maybe with an existing item that I don't care about editing, I can grab it and I can do the color picker and I can pick this color and then OK. I might copy this value first so that I don't lose it after I replace it, because as soon as I do the picker, I'm going to lose that. So I would pick that and then OK it. And what's going to happen is it's going to populate that color value here. And so then, I can scroll through the list and I can find, well, that's an FF1, 2, 3, or FF, B, F7. Okay, now let's say that this was the color and I found it. And now I kind of be like, okay, that's what this document tab is called in here. So that's kind of a way to kind of reverse engineer what is the name of something. You just have to be careful with text, really small text. You may want to zoom in a lot, because what happens with the color picker is if you get right on the edge of something, you get kind of a half tone where it's being blended, anti-lazed with what's near it. So you have to make sure you zoom in enough on some of the elements in your code to get the right color. But once you know what that color code is, you can come here with the group by color and maybe find, okay, it's got to be one of these two things or something like that to help you figure out what the name of it is. So I think that covers everything I wanted to cover real quick. So when you get done customizing your theme and you're happy with it, you just do a release build, switch over to the folder, the release bin folder, where it goes. You can, of course, if you don't know, you can open folder and file explorer, and then you just double click this VSIX and it'll prompt you to install that in Visual Studio. And then you need to come here and select your theme. And so you would come here and pick the theme that you just installed, and you're good to go. So I don't like the fact that they kind of chose this put all these hurdles in front of you to do something as simple as customizing colors and having install extensions to do all that. But it is what it is. So I thought I'd share that. Take care.